Moderator, am I?
1, 2, 1, 2. There we are. Well, good afternoon, everybody, at the ITUC Global Congress and anyone that may be watching the live stream. This is the first of our lunchtime panel debates, which will be happening every lunchtime right here. Most days we'll be having 2 half-hour discussions in different languages. Today, obviously, the press conference took precedence, and a lot of our friends are now downstairs doing the stunt down there with the Qatari World Cup bid. Look, we're really lucky for our first panel to be joined by 2 of the movement's most influential leaders, and we are hoping for another one to be joining us before too long. So, to my left is Francis O'Grady, who's the General Secretary of the TUC, and AFL-CIO President Richard Trumka. We're here to talk about the ITUC Global Poll, which was released just yesterday at the Congress. Look, the poll, which is, you know, the biggest of its sort, 13,000 surveys, 14 countries around the world, but it paints a really bleak picture of workers who feel the economic system's no longer working for them. Family income falling behind cost of living, reduced job security, and a loss of faith in government to stand up for their interests. So I just wanted to start with both of you, reflecting on whether that talks to how things feel amongst your members. Maybe you first, Richard. You know, 5 years ago, the world looked on as President Obama was elected on a platform of hope and yes, we can. And in America now, we've got 70% of respondents saying the nation's heading in the wrong direction. You know, what's gone wrong there?
Well, first of all, the defining economic fact in the U.S. for the last decade or so is that productivity has continued to go up and wages have actually been stagnant or gone down. So people are discouraged. But that's the old story. The new story is that they are really starting to rally around increasing wages. So raising wages is a framework that we're using to convey everything that's going on out there. We've made wages in every aspect of the American life a national issue to debate. In this election coming up, it'll be the issue that's debated. That'll be good for workers because we want to change what's been going on.
Can I just stay on the President for a sec? Has it been a disappointment, this era of democratic national leadership for your members?
You know, the results have been disappointing. President Obama came in and he had relayed a real sense of hope with everybody. I think he was overly optimistic about the way the Republicans and the conservatives would treat him. They've been more than willing to sacrifice the American economy and the goodness, what's good for the economy and its people in order to get at him. Some of it has been out-and-out racism. There's no question about that. But he needs to push a little more. He needs to focus a little more, and he's begun to do that. He's begun to look at push for an increase in the minimum wage, an extension of unemployment insurance. We're talking about a better trade agreement, but yet we have a long way to go. So if you were grading him, well, the results, you'd have to give him a C for results, but I think his heart's been in the right place, so you get an A for effort.
And do you feel a lack of hope amongst your members now? Or?
No, I think it's just the opposite right now. I think they've been beat down so far. They've said that's enough. You're starting to see the membership in various sectors of our economy. They're starting to come together. In fast food, they're demanding $15 an hour in wages or living wages. In state after state, you're starting to see workers join together to get a raise in the minimum wage. People that never thought about having collective bargaining before are now talking about having collective bargaining in professional sectors, in taxi cabs, and day laborers, and home care workers, domestic workers are all coming together, and we're actually trying to increase the level. They're organizing, and we're hopeful it will increase the wages for everybody, and they have a sense of hope. They have a sense of hope in each other, not necessarily in government, because I think they're skeptical right now because of what's happened over the years. how the government has used their power to bail out banks rather than revive the economy, how they've negotiated bad trade deals that's lowered our standards. Well, they were designed to lower our standards. So they're skeptical about the government, but still believe that the government can be hopeful and helpful to them.
So, Francis, the economic insecurity story isn't much different in your country, according to these poll results. One of the things that stood out, 3/4 of people don't believe the minimum wage is sufficient for a decent life in your country. How is the economic insecurity affecting your members?
Well, I would say that things in Britain aren't quite as bad as they are in the States when measured in respect of inequality between the rich and the rest, but we're on the same track. The 5 richest families in the UK, between them have more money than the poorest 12 million. We've seen the richest 1,000 people in Britain double their wealth over the last 5 years when ordinary working people have had real pay cuts for years and are feeling it, and not just in terms of their pay packets, but cuts to jobs and services. So things are pretty tough. And I mean, I'm an optimist by nature because I think that's a necessary quality for any union leader at any level. But I would say we're in quite a difficult place. I think faith in politicians is at an all-time low. Actually, never mind which way people vote, turning them out to vote is going to be an uphill struggle, I think, with the general election coming in 2015. Unions are more trusted than many other institutions or people in Britain, and that's something that we can use to our advantage. We've been campaigning hard for very simple demands, but demands that we know make a difference to ordinary working people and that ordinary working people tell us are important to them. So we want decent jobs, we want fair pay, we want decent public services, protect our NHS, our children's centres, our libraries, our leisure centres. But we also want more than that. We're more ambitious. We want people to have a say at work, and that's through strong unions for sure, but it also needs a root and branch change in our corporate governance system so that we start resetting that balance button and giving ordinary working people at work a say in the way that their companies run. And that's a very big and ambitious change, but you know, if political democracy was our big struggle in the 20th century and the 19th century, then I think economic democracy is the big struggle for the 21st.
And I guess the starting point of that debate is that inequality frame that you were speaking about a little bit earlier. Is the language of inequality alive in the public debate in Britain at the moment?
I think it is, and I think people feel angry, they feel a sense of grievance around basic fairness. But we've also seen the right regroup and play a pretty well-worn game of divide and rule, dividing the people who have jobs against those who don't, those who are just about getting by against the poor, public sector against private sector. You know, it's the old divide and rule game, and certainly in some of the attitudes that we see on welfare, for example, the right has had some success. So I guess what I'm saying is, you know, we're kind of very clear on our campaign. We've got a lot of popular support, but let's not pretend that this is going to be easy. There are some issues for us in the UK, and I believe in Europe as a whole, on welfare and on migrant workers, where we've got a tough battle to fight.
Yeah, this notion of downward envy, I think that's very much alive in most modern democracies, isn't it, Richard?
Say that again.
The notion of downward envy, so that when a group of people are having power pushed upon them, rather than fighting back, the temptation is to push further down the line.
You know, you asked earlier, you asked Francis if inequality is out there. Yeah, we're debating inequality, and people are talking about inequality, but the policies that they offer don't match the rhetoric that they're talking about inequality. And that's true in the United States, where we say, oh, we're against inequality, and the top 1% or the top 1% continue to grow by leaps and bounds. CEOs grow by leaps and bounds. And because of the Supreme Court in the United States, those with all the money now can dump unlimited amounts of money into elections, which will even increase their power in the future. And then you have institutions like the OECD that on Monday talks about inequality, on Tuesday makes excuses for mass unemployment. So you don't know which one you're actually talking to. Our job is to match the policy with the rhetoric, and we haven't been successful in doing that yet.
But I think that also raises big questions for us as a global trade union movement, because some of these solutions have to be global. That's not an excuse for national governments, but it does mean that we need to be smarter, ever smarter, in our strategies globally. So the nature of capital has fundamentally changed. You know, the academics talk about financialized capital, we talk about Wall Street and the City of London, but what we know is that we're now dealing with new organizations like hedge funds that play outside the rules. We're seeing tax avoidance on a massive scale.
Absolutely.
One of the reasons why ordinary people feel powerless is because these masters of the universe who stride around deciding whether or not they're going to pay tax as a matter of charity rather than obligation, feel beyond their reach, and they don't have faith in national governments to be able to pull them to account. On the contrary, they play the blackmail card that if you start getting tough with us, we'll bail out. That holds true when we raise arguments about greed in the boardroom, people saying you won't get the talent, they'll all go and live in America. Yeah. Lucky you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Or tax avoiders, you know, you'll lose the jobs and investment if you start getting tough with us. So as an international trade union movement, we need a much even sharper sense of how capital has changed, what our response should be, what are the synchronized programs and actions that we need working people around the world to take part in if we are going to start reversing that huge tide of inequality.
Yeah, look, there are two things that really stood out clearly in this poll to me. The first was that the problems in one country are the problems in every other country. There's a commonality. And the other common theme was a lack of faith in governments and effectively in the democratic process, and this sense that corporate interests are being placed ahead of the interests of ordinary people. And that really does lay out a massive challenge for unions and political systems globally, and it really requires a new form of thinking, doesn't it? Because you're dealing with these forces that don't respect national boundaries and control national governments.
Well, it absolutely does, and it emphasizes the point that Francis was making about the need for international solidarity, the need for the ITUC to build power worldwide. But I think it also points to us, because we have some obligations and responsibility too. Currently, we're too small collectively to be able to change the equation out there, which means, one, we have to look at ourselves and say we need to spend more money, more resources, organizing new members, bringing trade union and collective bargaining to workers that haven't had it traditionally or need it more than anything else right now. The second thing is we have to reach out to our progressive allies and form strategic partnerships. In the United States particularly, they would line up the progressive groups and sort of beat us in echelon. And we watched each other get beat, but we never joined together. 6 months before our convention last September, we brought all of those progressive groups together. We said, look, if we continue to do what we're doing, we'll continue to be shrunk into oblivion. We'll be irrelevant. We need to work together, one, to define the problem, and two, to solve the problem, and then three, execute together. Politically, legislatively, collective bargaining, and in organizing, all of us work together, and we're starting to see real progress there. Progressive groups coming together to form a bond that is much stronger than any of us are individually.
I mean, I agree with that. We've always had to be a social movement as well as a trade union movement, and those are our roots, certainly in the UK. where, we were born from social movement campaigning, and we were born from the realization that we needed representation in Parliament too, that we couldn't do it all at the workplace. And I think, as I said before, I think one of our big challenges in the UK is that there are around 6 million people who aren't even registered to vote, and they're much more likely to be low-paid, blue-collar workers, women, and the young and migrant workers than any other. The rich tend to get their form in. So we need to rebuild at that level. But I think we also, as a global trade union movement, we need to start asserting what we believe is the essential program to rebuild a new economy that works for ordinary working people and not just the rich. And we need to push that in every country at the same time, and maybe set aside some of the differences we might have in some areas and really focus on what unites us. But it's massively important, I think, because there is this huge sense of disconnection from politicians, even the good ones. And it's kind of rebuilding confidence, but also reminding people of the power we do have. In Britain, we're still, we're 6 million strong. We're the only democratic membership movement that big. So we can make a difference.
If you look at the numbers, 76% of respondents across these 13 nations say unions have an important role to play in society.
Have what?
Yeah, an important role.
An important role to play in society. So the support for union values is far greater than union membership. And it strikes me that the union member model of join or not be a member, there's a cruder term in Australia, $500 or get lost. Is that holding back? Do there need to be new ways of looking at how unions build membership and build a movement that's beyond the full membership model? Are you looking at things like that?
Well, first of all, in the United States, it's over 80% of the people agree with our general values and what we believe are important. And we have begun to reach out. New models, experimenting, doing things new ways is very, very important. We've done that a bit. We have a thing called Working America, where we go into a working class neighborhood cold. We now go to no union household. We knock on the door. We say, here's what we stand for. Would you like a voice in the political arena and legislative arena? Join us. We've organized in the last 5 years 3.5 million members that
Fantastic,
way.
Yeah.
They're associate members of the AFL-CIO. We then give them an education program, and they perform in electoral politics 1 percentage point better than our active members did in the last presidential race with President Obama. To augment that, or to supplement that, we've also done a thing called common sense economics, where we do a narrative or an analysis of the economy and how it's been used to hurt workers and a path outward. We take that not only to union members, but to non-union members. We hope to take it to a couple of million non-union members in the United States this year to get them involved in the electoral process and help us grow and help us defend one another. In the US, less than 50% of the people vote, eligible voters. When you ask them why, they give you 2 reasons. First reason, nobody asked me. Second reason, no matter who wins, I lose, so it doesn't matter. Our job is to make sure that we not only get people elected, but after they're elected, we hold them accountable and make them deliver on the promises to workers rather than all the austerity policies that have been the hallmark and the bane, quite frankly, of all workers around the world.
Frances, you've got a general election coming up in 12 months now. How much of your activity in the next 12 months is purely political and how much is recruitment at the same time?
It's got to be both. It matters, the next election matters for us, not least because the current Conservative Prime Minister, David Cameron, has made very clear that if the Conservatives get in again, they will introduce bans on strikes in essential services and thresholds for strike ballots. And I think we also have concerns that our funds and our time off for our reps will be under even more pressure. But more than that, he says he's only just begun on their austerity project, and that means more jobs, including union jobs, more services that make up our social wage, and the ability for working people to speak up and stand up to the boss will be under huge pressure. So it matters. But we have to remember our ultimate power comes from the workplace. That's why we are a trade union movement. And there's a lot more organising to do, including, I would say, particularly amongst young people where, we've got a lot more work to do to reach out to the new generation of workers, not just because of their age, but because of where they're more likely to work. They're more likely to be on 0 hours contracts, temporary agency contracts, working in hotel and catering, fast food joints where the turnover might be 400% a year. So that raises big questions about how we organise ourselves as unions. We've had some successes. A number of our unions have been looking at much smarter strategic organising down supply chains because, unless we can tell workers that if we organise, we get to meet the boss, we get a crack at having an agreement with the boss on your pay and conditions, then it's hard to persuade people to join. And of course, many people you take, for example, the white meat industry, their wages are ultimately decided by the big supermarkets at the top. So unless we organise that whole industry, the supply chain from top to bottom, we're never going to get in the room with the boss who actually decides the price of labour. So we've been taking a much more focused approach to how we organise, and that is beginning to pay dividends.
Obviously, the focus of Congress is to act on a global level. How much appetite do you think there is amongst your members for opportunities to influence the way the global economy is operating?
Well, there's a tremendous appetite. A number of our affiliates have been working internationally for years. I come out of the mine workers, and we've had international coalitions for years. In fact, we ran a three-continent proxy fight occasionally in the very near past. So there's a great appetite. What we need to do right now is convert our institutions from being talking institutions to acting institutions so that we can actually conduct worldwide campaigns and we can stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters, whether they're in Guatemala, they're in Germany, whether they're in the Ukraine or in the Middle East. And we're working at that. The ITUC is converting from being a place where we talk and converse and pass nice policies to a place where campaigns are actually originated and run effectively.
Well, you saw from the media attention around the Qatari campaign how if you have the right target, you can kick a goal, didn't you?
The other good target would be Walmart.
Yeah.
The bane of the world. Their business model is designed on driving wages down no matter what country they're in. They've been quite successful in the United States in driving wages down. We will work with other countries to be able to make sure Walmart starts to raise wages rather than lower wages around the world.
Francis, you were talking about your 21st century vision for a more activist base in the markets from workers. That's obviously international in its nature as well. What are the building blocks there?
I think part of the work that we can do at a global union level is this figuring out where are the front lines. I think the ITUC has run some fantastic campaigns, but the point hasn't just been to expose the exploitation of workers in Qatar or any particular group. It's been about raising the whole issue that unless we have minimum labour standards worldwide that are enforced and raised, then we're always going to be caught in this race to the bottom. But I think we also need to think even harder about the way the world is changing. We're seeing a shift of economic power from west to east. We're seeing the rise of the BRIC countries, and I'm very conscious that what happens to the trade union movements in the BRIC countries will affect us all, that all of our futures depend on each other, but there are hotspots in the world, there are front lines in the world where perhaps we need to think about whether we're putting our brain power and our muscle power in the right places to get the biggest returns for working people worldwide.
Look, I'll finish off the discussion with what I thought was the most shocking finding in this poll, which was more than half of all respondents thought that the next generation would not be finding a decent job. And we've only been polling for the last 30 or 40 years, but I suspect that this would be if you had polled back the last millennium, this is the first time people are thinking that the next generation are going backwards rather than forwards. How important is this moment in history to turn this economic story around from one of corporates running governments to people running governments?
Every democracy has a tipping point. There comes a point where the powerful become so powerful that you can't reverse it, that they then make all the rules in the future so they continue to be in power, continue to write the policies. We're very close to that tipping point, and most workers understand that. I think it's absolutely essential for us to seize on this moment, to write a new chapter that says the policy of austerity and neoliberalism has failed miserably. We can do better. It's time for us to come together and to look for policies that actually advance individuals. I think this is a very, very critical moment. And the chapter will be written one of two ways. If we fail to seize on this moment, I think we will continue to see the elite get more powerful. And if we do seize on this moment, I think we have the opportunity to create an economy, a global economy that addresses 1.2 billion people who live in extreme poverty, the 202 million people that are unemployed, girls that are being abducted every day and sold off because they wanted to get an education, and workers that are killed in ones and twos and by the hundreds in some instances. We'll be able to reverse that. It's going to take all of us, as Francis said at the beginning, it's going to take international solidarity and an international framework, if you will, and raising wages is that framework. If you raise wages worldwide, you create demand, the demand creates the market creates the jobs at that point, and we all live a better life.
A word of hope from you, Francis, before we...
Oh, I think we can do it. I mean, I think we saw after the financial crash kind of ruthlessness from those who oppose us that I half admire. They didn't mess about. You'd have thought they were on the back foot, but they came back very fast and very hard. And they're pursuing a process, it seems to me, of casualisation of our workforce, our members on a massive scale, an unprecedented scale, and pushing back very hard. But change usually takes longer than a couple of years. I think we're in one of those points in history where we are seeing the rise of single issue groups, social movements. We're seeing trade unions fighting back, and it will take a period of time to bring that together into an irresistible force. But I know that when we are united, they can't break us, and we will win.
Well, on that note, I'd like to thank you both for participating in our first Congress Live panel. Thank you both. And we'll be back tomorrow with two panels, one on youth movements in South America and the other one on climate change. So thank you very much.